If you didn't know, May is Great Debate Month here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you all being here for our kickoff. And this is really apropos if you are following, which all of you are, the great debate that is being waged across college football that is in the moment concerning the Pac-12, its future, its vulnerabilities, possibly, and the Big 12, its priorities, its objectives, its pursuits, possibly. So, from the top, right next to me, we've got Tony Altamore, consultant, strategist, also host for our USC postgame show and Pac-12 chat show right here at the Voice of College Football. Pleased to present also Josh Neighbors up top here from Locked On Big 12. We appreciate Josh being here. Spencer McLaughlin's here. Look at this from Locked On Ducks and Locked On Pac-12, and you can catch Spencer on YouTube as well, and joins us on a fairly regular basis to talk Oregon football. We appreciate Justin Walker being here, Couz's Corner, right here on YouTube. So check out Couz. He's a great guy, and he's all over West Virginia, college football, and a lot of realignment talk with Couz as well. Gentlemen, how we doing tonight?
Ready to rock and roll.
Doing well.
All right, we're ready to rock and roll. That's
Good,
what everyone wants to hear, that we're ready to rock and roll. One short comment to make to everyone in the chat, and I know this is a complete oxymoron, but we want respectable trash talking. Does that make any sense? We hope you know what we mean. State your opinion, be bold, be a fan, but no personal attacks on anyone here, please. You've got like 364 other days during the year to attack me. You can do that. I have no issue with that. But please, these are my guests. Do not attack anyone. Even if you don't agree with them, you can state that, but do it respectfully. Everyone's here. Everyone's a fan of college football. We all want to have a good time. We want to have a great discussion, and we want logic to win out and just fun college football discussion. So, Tony, we will allow you to lead us off.
All right, guys. Well, just to give a little bit of structure here, right? Because I think one of the things that we're often missing on this is really sort of some structure. So we want to talk tonight about, should Pac-12 teams consider leaving their conference to join the Big 12, or should Big 12 teams consider leaving their conference to join the Pac-12? And we want to talk about it tonight in three different scenarios. And they're sort of going to be descending on sort of the likelihood of what we know is in the world, and let us really each kind of, dive into what we think and ask each other questions and go back and forth. And we want your participation from the chat for everybody who's live in the chat. So those three scenarios, based on what we know to be kind of likelihoods of scenarios. First one is, what if the Pac-12 TV deal, which we are about to find out hopefully soon in the next month or two, turns out to be relatively similar to the Big 12 deal, plus or minus, say, $5 million or so. So we'll talk about that first. Then we'll get into part two. What if it is materially less? What do we think? Should teams consider making a move? Or part three, whether there's something that happens in the world, whether there's a big change or a major shift, kind of an earth-shattering, kind of that nuclear scenario that would make a change. Should teams consider making a move? Now, we're going to talk tonight a little bit differently, because one of the things we're not going to do is we're not making predictions. We're going to be making recommendations. And that goes for you guys in the chat, too. We want to hear your recommendations. What do you think teams should do? It's not about what is going to happen. It's about what you guys think and what everybody here on the panel thinks should happen. Now, just a quick refresher for those folks that are new to history. This is actually the 8th time that these two conferences have bumped up against each other in realignment. So, folks that don't know this, in the 1950s, when they were forming the Pac-12, and they were looking to make it the airplane conference, a couple of the Big 12 teams wanted to join. In the 90s, there was the whole mess with the Southwest Conference flirtation that sort of blew up with Ann Richards and Baylor. In 2010, Larry Scott's Pac-16 plan sort of, again, blew up over the Longhorn Network issue. In 2011, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State applied to the Pac-12 again and weren't selected. 2016, the Big 12 went on its expansion binge that then Texas decided not to move forward on. 2021, the Big 12 teams, most of them applied to the Pac-12. Houston and TCU were considered, turned down because they were dilutive. 2021, the Big 12 did their big expansion. Certain teams were part of that. San Diego State was an applicant for that. And then in 2022, of course, as we know that they have tried to, since 2022, they've been trying to add some Pac-12 teams. So we, I don't know if we'll need that later, but we want to really get started now here, focusing on part one. So guys, if the Pac-12 TV deal is similar to the Big 12 media deal, again, give or plus or minus 5 million, should teams make a move?
I think it depends on which school you're talking about, because you could, I think, more easily make the case for a given program to be in the Big 12 than you can for another one. And I mean, it certainly depends on what considerations a university is going to give to athletics versus academics in all these discussions and whatnot, because we all know presidents are making the moves and they don't have just, you know, one point of focus. But I do think there are schools that are going to not be as keen on the academic side. My Oregon Ducks, for instance, are not a big research school. They don't have an amazing academic reputation. Frankly, I find their AAU label to be like kind of strange and like a little bit random, because it's not at all what they're known for. And I think as a university, they're definitely prioritizing the athletics component of that pretty strongly. But I don't see, you know, if the deal is close, like there's an element of increased travel costs as well if you were to go to the Big 12 as a West Coast school, as I understand it, and that's in like the $2 to $3 million range, or somewhere in there. So if you're talking about a deal that's $4 million less, that might only be, or $4 million more in the Big 12, that might only net like $2 million for an athletic department. And look, a school that doesn't have as much money, like, you know, neither of the Arizona schools are notoriously flush with cash. Maybe they would see that as something that they should do, but I don't see that benefit being like really, really great for them on the athletics front. Arizona, maybe for basketball, sure. But I think with the 12-team playoff coming, I think that kind of reinforces that it's not that appealing of an option in my view to go to the Big 12, because I just don't know like what dramatically changes if you go over there from an athletic standpoint.
I'm on the same page with that. Yeah, I mean, if we're talking $5 million, you know, and in from that point, it's not really much of a conversation. So I'll be quick on this. I'll just say that there's not much reason to leave, although future speculation about, hey, what does the next TV deal look like? That might say, you know, might think twice, but no, I think you stay if it's within 5.
I think it depends on, you said mix of streaming. I think it depends on how heavy that mix is. If it's 80% streaming, then I think it's not going to work. If it's 50-50 or even 60-40, maybe you stay if you're within 5 million. But if you're getting up to 70-80% streaming, then I'm not sure they would be able to. I don't think the exposure would allow them to stay in the Pac-12 and continue to get the national recognition they need as a program and to compete at the national level as a Power 5 school. They need to be on linear television for at least the next 3 to 4 years.
Well, I think that kind of depends on which program you're talking about, because like Washington State and Oregon State don't have, you know, national championship, or even the Arizona schools, frankly, are not in a place where Colorado or even Cal at this point don't have, you know, the ability to say like, oh, we're just a couple of years away from being, you know, a perennial top 10 team. Like they're much longer builds on that front, much like Utah has been in the Pac-12 since they joined in 2011 and are just now 2-time defending champions. They've been to 4 straight Pac-12 championship games and like actual full seasons there. But I don't know if that element of it, like having a few more games on streaming versus linear, I'm not sure that radically shifts their calculus for how they feel they can continue to be competitive and grow their programs going forward.
And another thing somebody brought up,
and I'll tell you guys, I look at this. Sorry, go ahead.
The Oregon-Washington
Go ahead,
thing.
Goose.
I know the Oregon-Washington thing is a rumor, so I'm not going to get on that too much. But if there are schools in that conference that don't want to sign a grant of rights deal, that could also change this. That changes the conversation as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, but if they're not going to sign for the Pac, I don't know what, like, I don't think they have as many options as they would maybe like to have, because if you're gonna try and play hardball with the Pac-12, you can't go in there and be bluffing, because then you're left in a position of no leverage whatsoever. And I don't.
Can you though? I mean, what were they like? What are they kick Oregon and Washington out of the conference?
No, I know, but I'm saying if you're trying to, I don't know, get unequal revenue sharing, for instance, and
Which Oregon and Washington should try to do, by the way. That
right,
should be the
and
range.
I understand why, because they're clearly the biggest remaining television draws in the conference, and the numbers have borne that out since about 2015 or so. But what is kind of the, I don't know that there's an or, like give us unequal revenue sharing, or like do you feel like they have one right now? Because I think the Big Ten's made it clear that they're not gonna keep going.
The other thing, by the way, that I think is kind of interesting in this debate, which happens a lot, is people talk about like Washington and Oregon like they're these like hypothetical things. Washington is chairman of the conference, right? So like when people are like, oh, I don't think Washington will agree. Washington is the chairman, putting it in front of everybody else. So like there's no such thing as Washington won't agree, because Washington's putting it in front of everybody else. So there is no such idea as Washington won't agree to the grant of rights, because Washington is creating the grant of, like, Washington is the chairman. One of the big differences between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and this is actually goes back to the 50s, ties to the Ivy League, problems with the Big Ten, all that, is that in the Pac-12, the presidents run the show. The commissioner doesn't run the show. I don't know if you guys know this. The Pac-12 did not allow the commissioner to use the title commissioner until 1986, because he was not the guy in charge. The presidents were in charge. And there's a big mindset difference that Big 12 fans do not understand, that the Pac-12 answers to the presidents. So if the presidents, the conference won't just create something and give it to the president. The presidents are in charge. The conference serves at the pleasure of the president.
Isn't that the case in every conference?
It sounds like anything to say, but it's a big difference. What?
I mean, I'm pretty sure pretty sure it's that way in every conference, is it not?
It's very different, particularly in the Pac-12 and the Ivy League, who don't, they very much, it's not just that they're sort of oversight. For example, the way that the Big 12 is always like putting out press releases and pumping it up and putting the commissioner front and center. The commissioner uses the phrase "I." The Pac-12 commissioner, other than maybe Larry Scott for a couple years before he got fired, don't use the phrase "I." It's "we." It's a big. It sounds like a little nuanced difference, but to them, it's a big difference. They don't have a carnival barker speaking for them. The presidents are the ones in charge. That's why Kliakov doesn't give interviews. When people talk about like, oh, Kliakov, like he's like the guy out there doing it. No, he's like the manager. The presidents are the owners. It's very different mindset than the Big 12. Again, it's very much like the Ivy League does this too. Like, do you guys know the executive director of the Ivy League? Also not allowed to call herself the commissioner. No, because she doesn't put herself out front. The presidents put themselves out front. So it's just a mindset difference. And I'll tell you that it's something that is not, that to Pac-12 schools is not attractive about moving to the Big 12. And the other thing is when we talk about like $5 million, Washington's budget is 9.5 or whatever billion dollars. $5 million is not even a rounding error. So nobody's going to consider making a move for $5 million one way or the other. Because the other thing is the PAC has the PAC ALC, which is their sort of academic consortium that actually shares research grant, research support services. They aid each other in a lot of different things, particularly supported by Cal and Washington. And so there are tens of millions of dollars of impact of if they were to even consider moving a conference, that, this stuff is just kind of a rounding error.
So Tony, I have a question for
$5
you.
$5 million is not a rounding error. I think that's unfair.
And,
I think $5 million.
And again, it's not just about
out of a
money.
$9.3 billion budget.
Well, hold on. I think what Josh is getting at was the question that I was wanting to ask, which is when you're talking about the $5 million versus $9.3 billion, how readily, let's say that the media deal comes out and it's $4 million less, how easily can the University of Washington, which does have a big endowment and does have a big operating budget and whatnot, move dollars around to make up that gap compared to what other schools are getting? Because the money goes to the athletic department.
In the last documented year, Washington's fundraising was $780 or something $million.
Right, but
The
what
average Big
How
12
much
percentage?
is
school
for
was
the
under
athletic
100 million.
department?
But how much of that gets into the athletic department? Because
That's
I
the
think
athletic
in
department.
principle,
Same.
schools like Oregon and Washington, can raise more money than in Arizona and Arizona State. So a $5 million gap to them is not going to be as significant. But for other schools, like the Arizona schools, for instance, it might not be quite as easy to do that. So how
Here,
how
let's take a
easily
look
can
at
that money
fundraising.
get shifted?
Well, it's
I
certainly.
can
I
show
mean,
you.
those two
I mean,
schools are
depends
not
on
the
what
ones.
the fundraising for.
Well, those two schools aren't the ones we're really concerned about, right? Like Oregon and Washington are they're comparing themselves differently. We're talking more about the ones
Since
that we think about
joining the
jumping.
PAC ALC. Since joining the PAC ALC, Colorado has upped their research by what, $350 million. A lot of that's due to
I mean,
the
yeah,
support they
research
get.
money's got nothing to do with athletics. Nothing to do with
It
athletics.
has everything to do with the PAC ALC. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, sure, we've involved that, but then so why is this being talked about then? Is it just like, is it fake news?
Good question.
Believe? Because this is what I'm saying. This is kind of a big point of this. And I brought this up before. I want to bring it up again. Like, we are sitting here and according to Stuart Mandel, Pac-12 presidents were a bit too optimistic, and they're sitting there. They don't have a deal. And according to reporting as well, multiple of these schools have had conversations with the Big 12. So it's not chump change. This is conversations happening in the room. We're not in those rooms, but they are conversations happening. That is why we're talking about it. The money is significant for the athletics.
Yeah, I believe we're getting to the crux of why there are divisions among logical people, divisions among which way this could go. Is all the money, is it run as a corporation to say, we have a division that's struggling here and they may not get the same deal if we go in this direction, but that's okay because overall, as a complete institution, we are still aligned with whom we want to be aligned with. And there is so much more money in all of these other departments and divisions. Therefore, that's okay because that's insignificant compared to the rest. Or we expect all of these various divisions within the institution to run autonomously and cut the best deal that they can for their individual division or department. Therefore, that is significant that we're going to get $40 million per year for our football program versus $28 million per year. That's the big question for me.
But it all ties together because, and here's why. Your athletics, football is the front, and basketball, even for that matter, is the front porch to your university, and it ties into attendance. It ties into how many students you get into your school, and that all ties into the money for the university. And you can't tell me a lot of these donors aren't sports fans. And if your sports team if they suck or they're not happy with what's going on, then they could very well say, "I'm not giving money to the engineering department," or whatever. So I understand they're separate. I mean, I understand that there's an academic piece, but at the end of the day, football is driving
Here's
huge
annual fundraising
a huge
number.
portion of. I'm not finished talking. It's driving a huge portion of the economics of the universities. I'm done now.
I think you're totally right, Coots. And that's one of the reasons. For example, you look at the Arizona schools. Arizona State raised $270 million. How much of that comes from their huge donor base and their alumni base in Southern California and Northern California? And how much of that comes from their not very big alumni base in Iowa or Florida?
Why would they're going to stop giving money just because you change conferences? That doesn't make
also
any sense.
This does say this includes adjacent university medical schools, which is, that's a little bit unfair if we're talking about the school's fundraising. I mean, that is,
why is it unfair?
Because I, as somebody who's got two doctors as parents,
football to fundraise for
hold on. As somebody who's got two doctors as parents, medical school fundraising should not be included. We're talking if we're having the guys. I don't know about medical. It should not be included in any graphic that we're all here considering. I mean, I don't think the medical school, like just say Stanford left for the Big Ten or somewhere else. I don't think that they're, whatever medical facilities they have are going to get less funding. I just think it's an unfair part of the conversation where it's like, you're part of the Big 12 conference. Oh man,
having worked in
don't deserve as much funding.
fundraising, having helped with USC athletics fundraising for 4 years that I worked in our athletic department, I can tell you their medical school does a ton of fundraising at athletic events.
I'm sure.
And
I'm sure
the presence of where they are doing that fundraising matters a lot.
Like, oh my God, we're playing Washington State or we're playing Oklahoma State. I'm not going to give money like to the school. Is not. I don't think that's necessarily how this thing goes. And also I have to say this too. You know, Arizona's president mentioned the Big 12.
Oh, we lost Josh.
Oh,
There
sorry,
he is.
Sorry, I bumped the wrong thing. I was trying to highlight you and I bumped you off. My bad. Sorry, Josh. Go ahead.
It's fine. No, I'm saying Arizona's president brings up, you know, hey, Lubbock's not too far away. Like, we can do it. San Diego State, their AD says we're either going to the Big 12 or the Pac-12. So the idea that there's so many factors, the Big 12 is not a part of this conversation, which is like, I'm kind of getting the vibe out of this. It's incorrect. Like, they are a big part of this conversation. And here's the thing is, those factors, as much, you know, credit as we should give them, like, there is no television deal, and the Big 12 schools, by all reports, are still being considered. Once again, we all can agree that the front runner, all these schools want to remain in the pack. They do. That's kind of the basis of all of this. But they have not seen numbers, yet for them to commit to it. And it's been past multiple deadlines they have set. So we can do the fundraising thing. We can talk about,
it's their deadline.
Yes, but if we hear Stuart Mandel saying that schools were overly optimistic a week after 3 university presidents went out and talked to the media about how confident they were in the numbers, that is a bit cause for concern. So as much as all of the fundraising numbers sound fantastic, we have to give credence to the idea that things are not going the way they want athletically, and that, we have to think about that when it comes to like this, that is the major part of this conversation. And the San Diego State president or AD says we might join the Big 12 or the Pac-12. List them both. That just shows you where this conversation is right now, I think.
Let's take a quick break. I'd like to acknowledge some of these super chats that are coming in. So we've got, and we can throw these around in regards to whomever wants to respond. We can allow everyone to respond. Brownton Beers saying here, the state of Colorado's population has also grown by 800,000 plus since joining the pack. And I doubt anyone moved there because they saw Colorado play Cal in football.
I don't know. It's cheap entertainment.
Entertainment's putting it kindly, but sure.
Hey, don't rip on Colorado's 1 win last year.
First of all, that was a riveting overtime game in Boulder. Second of all, somehow, some way, Colorado fans like continue to show up for the Buffs after all these years.
Well, they're showing up now.
No, but if you go look at their attendance numbers over the last 5 years or so, you'd be shocked how many people will go to those games. I just had to shout out Buffs fans because I have always been impressed by that. Like, they were terrible. Oregon went in there, they were like 1-5 or something like that, and Oregon drubbed them 49-10. And at the start of the game, there were, I don't know, 40,000 people in the stands.
A more
all right, so
poignant comment made here by Larry. Tony, if I could just catch up with these super chats. So Larry says, and hey, yes, the Big 12 has been prominent on ESPN Plus probably more than any other Power 5 conference. And Larry is stating, what guarantee for a Pac-12 team, I guess, going to the Big 12 being stuck on ESPN Plus?
ESPN, being on ESPN. If your programs are good enough, if the fact that you're on ESPN Plus means that you are part of the big ESPN family and you have a chance to be on ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, talking about streaming ability, Apple and Amazon cannot promise you that you will be on those big channels, the big ones that everybody has in their cable package.
Well said.
No, but there is also a component of games. There is also a component of major football or basketball games being on ESPN Plus, which
that's not happened. There's no major Big 12 football game that's been on ESPN Plus. Who's you got one? I cannot think of a major Big 12.
And not to throw shade at Kansas, but that's usually where they put our Kansas game.
Yeah, WVU Kansas State, Texas Tech, like those games are on ESPN
But
Plus.
so for the
and that's what ESPN Plus is for.
Right, for the Pac-12 schools that are reportedly in the mix or whatever that the Big 12 has been reaching out to go, are they going to get an increased level of visibility for their football games? Because the schools that you're talking about, look at the Arizona schools. They're both in rebuild mode right now. Like, I don't think they go to the Big 12 and then all of a sudden the Big 12 sees them as these tremendously valuable products, more so than the Pac-12 did, and they're going to put them on linear television
Arizona
for
basketball?
football. For
Arizona
basketball, sure, but I
basketball-
know but there was also a
Basketball's
Kansas State game
15%
that
of the
was on.
revenue.
20% is what is but also for football too. I mean, sure, ESPN Plus, but what's the difference between ESPN Plus and Apple TV Plus and Amazon Prime then?
Yeah, but
At
I
least,
think
at least with ESPN Plus, you have the chance of being eventually on ESPN. There is no Apple TV cables.
well, right. But if you're
still.
but if you're in the Pac-12, there's still expected to be a linear component of the deal. So if your program is relevant,
but
and
if
good
but
enough,
if the ESPN's not putting them on linear, then why would the two companies involved in the pack?
well, but that's kind of my point, is like, if you're a program that wants to be on linear television, and that's something that's of great importance to you, and you want to be competing at a level that makes you a valuable enough commodity to do that, I don't see how there's a huge advantage to be.
There is, because the two partners that
Pac-12.
the two partners that Big 12 has are ESPN and Fox. Who are the guaranteed partners that the Pac-12 has?
Right. So you have to wait and see on that front. That's fair.
We'll find that out. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. We'll find that out. It will be somebody. We'll figure out who it is when they let us know.
I'm still voting for Ion
I actually
Television.
think. Hey, I mean, Ion is everywhere. It's not going to be Ion, but they're everywhere. One of the things, or we're told it's not going to be. We'll see.
I have
we'll
never
see
watched Ion Television a day in my life.
You've never watched the
one of the
Criminal
things that I
Minds
think
rerun on Ion Television? Come on now, Josh.
You never watched True TV until about 5 years ago either, right?
That's true.
Well,
I only watch
I
True
only
TV
do
one
for
time
like
a year,
2
but
weeks
that
in
one time a
March.
year, I watch True TV quite a bit.
2 weeks of March. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on to our section 2, which I think
Tony, I'm
kind
sorry.
of already hit a little. Go ahead.
Hey,
Do you wanna
Tony,
do
I'm sorry.
that thing?
Before we move on to that, I just want to recognize this super chat. Hero 75, a quiet school is a school planning to do something. I think the choices of Stanford, Cal will decide the fate of the Pac-12. If they go to the Big Ten, then the shared research money with the Pac goes as well.
So there's a catch to that, which is that the University of California is actually more Asian than people think. And the University of California is already a member of the Big Ten. Very, very interesting. And that actually is we're trying to we want to have a special episode and get somebody from to talk on our Pac-12 chat show about that soon. We've been trying to get some people on who can give us some insights on that. But the University of California is already a member of the Big Ten. And that's a very, very, very interesting thing.
And then Opie, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your contribution. It's a shame that someone will give less money just because they go to another conference. Donors should give the same anywhere you are, unless you think you are better than everyone. We need the ag universities so we can eat. Shaking my head.
So
I'm
Opie, I would
shaking my
challenge
head as
that.
well.
It's not that someone would give less money because they move to another conference. It's that you're not having those fundraising opportunities. So, for example, when the schools go on a road trip, they have fundraising targets. Like the presidents and the deans who are on that trip are actually meeting with donors. They're going and having visits and symposiums and receptions and all that. Like when USC goes to New York, like when they played Syracuse a couple of years ago, when they go to DC to play Virginia Tech or UVA, and I've been to all those games, there are all kinds of like big high dollar fundraising events. It's a big activity for the school. And so for the Pac-12 teams, the thing is for Arizona State, part of the reason adding San Diego State is so important is having that alumni engagement in California. You don't get that in Iowa. So if you're going to Iowa, you're not going to have that.
But you get it in Texas, don't you? You get it in Texas.
I don't know. They don't have that huge alumni base that they have in California. These schools are tied to the state of California, and they just are. Like organizationally, they are. It's why Colorado joined the Pac-12. It's why Dr. Schaefer, who was the legendary Arizona president for so long, fought to get them into the Pac-8 at the time into 10. Because they were so tied to California, again, so it's not that they don't raise as much money, it's that they are not linked. Now, the other thing is once you start losing that branding tie, that doesn't help you. And as far as ag schools go, the Pac-12 has 3 phenomenal ag schools. The University of California is the #1 ag and vet school in the country. Washington State's a phenomenal ag school. Oregon State is a phenomenal ag school. And I think, doesn't Arizona have a program that's pretty good? Arizona's the land grant school. But I'm not sure where the ag thing is for them. But yeah, so it's not that the donors don't give, it's that you don't have the events, you don't have those ties to the places where the donors are if those teams were to make a move. And
But if none of your games get seen by anybody, none of that's going to matter.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I mean, I guess possibly if you think that they're not going to get seen by anybody, they play on the Pac-12 network right now, which I would think anywhere they go is better to be seen.
I mean,
and they're not having problems. They're not having problems fundraising now.
I'm talking about.
So I don't think that the Big 12 is the crux of the difference for that.
Mansa Musa, thank you for the contribution. If Colorado and Arizona can't get $25 million per year with the Pac, how can they get 31 or 31 million with the Big 12? Wouldn't the per year school for the Big 12 go down?
Josh,
Yeah, so that is
yes,
correct.
the Big 12
It would not be right. It would not be 31. This is why, if it's within like 5, this is why it makes sense to stay, as we all kind of talked about in the beginning, right? But also, to me, the difference is this: is the Big 12 is going to offer security. The Big 12, if you go to the conference, the conferences that will go to market are going to be the Big 10, the SEC, and the Big 12. The ACC does not go to the market until 2036. So if you leave the Pac-12, you join the Big 12, you're in ostensibly what becomes a Power 4, right? If 4 schools leave or whatever it is, it's Power 4 at that point. So if the next television contract, like you're a conference offering games in all 4 time zones, that is significantly a better entity than the Pac-12 was just offering games after, losing, an arm and a leg here. And so you've strengthened your position in the Big 12 as a television entity. So it's not really just about the next, this one television contract right here, although it is. It's about the future as well. Like, this is why these leagues need to be thinking about the future, especially for the ones that are not the SEC of the Big 10.
And there's nothing.
I totally agree.
There's nothing to say that.
Go ahead, Goose.
Yeah, there's nothing to say that Fox. I know the pro rata only comes from ESPN, but that doesn't mean Fox can't change their mind and decide they want to go back to the negotiating table.
Also, it's $10 million. What, we're going to give them $2 million per school per year. It's going to be like in the area.
It also doesn't mean that they can't go and find a third party to bring in the deal,
right?
As well.
I mean, that's true, but at the same time, all I hear from Big 12 fans is how there's such a big media recession. The last thing the world Fox is going to do is just, if there's such a crazy media recession, is just write a check for the 2 worst teams in the Pac-12 to come join.
Right, but the check's not going to be it's not going to be $2 million. It's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10. So, if ESPN's guaranteed,
that makes no sense to me.
Why would what does make sense about it? So Fox just going to say
Fox
we're out.
Fox bought 26 games.
Right.
And they're just going to magically hand over an extra 10, 20 million because they've got the 2 new, they've now added the 2 worst teams.
They don't have to hand over 10, 20 million. I mean, $10 million, sure. Yeah, that would make sense. But also you get
extra.
Well, you get extra. Yeah. I mean, you're not just paying for the same amount of games.
If you
add more schools,
Fox has only bought 26 games.
But if you add more schools, there are more games. Like ESPN.
No, but that's on ESPN. That's
right.
the pro rata on ESPN.
Right.
The Fox piece, Fox has only bought 26.
But so if Fox agreed to add 2 more schools, they'd be picking up more games.
Why would they be doing? Their contract is only 26 games. It's not the pro rata. It's not for more.
But they can renegotiate
26
the contract.
They can negotiate. They would negotiate and pick up more schools unless they don't want to, as Koo said, and somebody else would do it. So the Big 12 is like, I think it's ridiculous.
That feels very like.
Okay,
very
here's
contradictory.
so is the Big 12 talking to Pac-12 schools with no idea that Fox is not going to do it, that would make no sense. Brett Yormark most likely has some kind of, not guarantee, but some kind of good faith negotiation with Fox, much like the Big Ten has, that I don't think Brett Yormark is going to these Pac-12 schools and being like, well, Fox, what do you think now? That would make no sense at all. Why would you do that? There is got to be.
I don't know. Why are they playing a game in
conversation.
Mexico? That doesn't make much sense either, but that's an whole other side subject.
Well,
I mean, just, but the thing is, when we look at the actual contract, as of now, they don't have the funding for it.
Right.
As of now, they have 20 million per team they have.
Right. ESPN has
that's
their
all we know
guaranteed
about.
portion.
That's all we know.
Fox has theirs. Sure. Fox is not.
There could be a
provider.
secret plan.
Sure. But I think it would be irresponsible to be like, Brett Yormark's got no idea what Fox wants to do. All of the movement in all of these conferences has been like, it's all by the television networks. I mean, if you talk to anybody in the industry, you know, it's all TV driving the entire thing.
All of that movement. There in the history of these 5 conferences, there have been 3 moves to another conference that wasn't involved, that wasn't leaving Big 12. And they're the 3 moves to the Big 10. In the history of the SEC, the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 10, the only 3 moves between any Power 5 conferences that didn't involve leaving the Big 12 were those. So there's not a lot of movement. That's the thing, is like, we talk about movement, we talk about stuff like
no,
it's
but the
Legos
last
that
2
like,
moves that have been made have been signed off, have been signed, sealed, delivered by the television companies. ESPN, let's be honest, ESPN and Disney made OU in Texas happen. By all accounts, and I trust Jeff Schwartz my life, he goes, yeah, Fox are the ones that signed off on Oregon and on USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. Those, and so
USC
I have a
did
tough
that.
time. Huh?
USC pushed that through Fox. That's
But
one of the advantages of
Fox,
being
USC
USC
is not
Fox is
pushing
heavily
Fox.
involved.
No, Fox is pushing the. No, USC is not.
USC and Fox. USC and Fox are integrated.
Why wouldn't they be?
I used to
They're
work in
like
Fox
this-
Plaza.
They're one of the biggest 5 to 10 brands in all of the sport. Why wouldn't USC and Fox should be in bed together? Fox,
Yeah,
pushed
USC
that
is
thing through.
USC
So-
Cinema School and Fox are in.
I don't
lockstep.
think it's
USC
USC
alumni
Cinema
are full
School.
of it.
Okay, I have to be honest. USC Cinema School and Fox getting the no. USC is one of the most important football brands of the last 20 of the 21st
USC
century.
alumni
Yeah.
are very big in running Fox.
But also Fox would be dumb for not adding them on.
And Disney.
Fox is right for bringing them over. What I'm saying is,
Yeah,
all of
it was
these
a
moves,
USC move.
the last line of realignment, the big moves, have all been signed off, and they've all been okayed by the TV networks. Those are the ones who are driving it. So I have a tough time believing that Brett Yormark is making offers without and having these conversations without knowing what the television networks and how they're going to react. That's the kind of the point of this entire exercise. So that's
All
my
right. So, all
point.
right. So let's go to our number 2 then. So I think I know where you guys all stand on this because we've kind of dived into this already. If the Pac-12 deal is, $5 or $10 million less, if it's not that close, should they move?
I think that again depends on the school and how much money you can readily move around within your university as a president into your athletic department. Because if you're saying, you're $10 million behind the Big 12 and you're however many more tens of millions of dollars already behind the SEC and the Big 10. But if you're a Pac-12 school and you're someone who is prioritizing athletics, like, you have to have the dollar figures at least be in the same range, or it's going to be much harder to compete. We've seen that with, the G5 schools over the years, where it's just this big, huge, massive difference. They can pay coaches more. Now with NIL, they can pay players more with their donors and all that sort of stuff. So if you're talking about, Oregon, Washington, Josh and I were talking about this earlier. If Stanford decided to care, like, those places have the money around the university and future Pac-12 member SMU. But those sorts of places have the money around the university to maybe make up for that gap, at least make it minimal, or at least make it of smaller impact. But look, Oregon State, Washington State always get left out of these conversations because they don't have tremendous value, which I think stinks because both their fan bases are extremely passionate, though there is one day a year in certain years where I really lament Oregon State fans. They do have a tremendously passionate fan base and represent a lot of things you want in a conference from some of your smaller schools fans. Is like they show up, they care, they want them to be good, they have some standards and such. So I think that those schools are in a tough spot. And other institutions, I don't have a great feel. I feel like Colorado is closer to the lower half of the conference in terms of being able to make up for that gap than the upper half. I feel like Utah is somewhere in the middle ish at that sort of range. But if you're talking about a $10 million gap, like, from an athletics fundraising standpoint and donors and all that sort of stuff, Oregon and Washington, Stanford, probably even Cal as well, though I don't know that many people who care about Cal, but they have to have some donors and boosters, I'd assume, somewhere at like they have to be there, right? There's just too many people in Berkeley for there to not be. But so those schools I wouldn't be as worried about, but other ones I'd look at and say you could make a more compelling argument if you're talking about taking that much less. But then, as we were talking about earlier, Josh, like if they jump to the Big 12 because they're like, well, we can't take an $8 million discount. We two schools, pick whichever two you want to go to the Big 12 because they've got more. How much does that bring it down? How much of a gap does that, help you close? Like how much are you actually netting there when you factor in, diluting the media rights payout in the Big 12 slightly. And then also it's going to cost more to travel to those places that are further away. It's probably impossible for us to sit here and give an exact number of what each school would be willing to accept in terms of a gap. We can probably just look at estimations because at the end of the day, it would come down to conversations between the president, the athletic director, and the fundraisers at the school in terms of what they think is possible, what their priorities are, and what their goals are going forward. But I definitely think it's, a varying impact depending on which institution you're talking about.
Again, everything you said there, I pretty much agree with, Spencer. But again, I think we're focusing too much on the money. Exposure. A report just came out today by Tony's favorite reporter, Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports. He says that the ESPN is now out of the running for Tier 1 rights for the Pac-12. They're not going to be the Tier 1 rights holder. So what's that tell you? It's likely going to be Apple or Amazon. They're probably going to be 70-80% streaming, and there are a lot of schools in the Pac-12 that will not accept that, in my opinion.
I don't know that we can believe anything from Dennis Dodd.
So I have to take issue with that. I really have to take issue with that because there's a lot of crap out there, but Dennis Dodd is a reputable source. And here's the thing. I acknowledge in my show, I say all the time, Dennis, his sources are very much rooted in the Big 12. I'll have to acknowledge that. Sure. Same thing for a guy like Brett McMurphy. But when Stuart Mandel, who said he'd be lucky if the Big 12 got AAC money, that is something you all can go find, who has been very much in the, on Pac-12 side, a lot of his reporting says that, well, they overshot the estimation. I believe that as well. I believe what Stuart puts out there. I think it's unfair to say Dennis Dodd does not know what he's talking about. We can't believe that. Look, is it a lot of Big 12 source stuff? Sure. But look at where we are situationally. We can't all sit here and be like, well, Pac-12 is kumbaya. It's not. And there have to be serious questions about.
No, but at the same time, Dennis Dodd's reporting, and we're not going to get into, we want to keep this focused on what we recommend. I can't think of anything.
But the problem is you're calling out Dennis Dodd. You're disparaging Dennis Dodd's reporting.
I didn't bring him up. I didn't bring him up. I find it to be about the National Enquirer lately. I didn't bring him up. I wouldn't bring him up. I don't bring up the anonymous Twitter accounts either that are also wrong. I'll tell you guys
did you just compare Dennis Dodd to an anonymous Twitter account?
He did, and he does it all the time, and that's why people on Twitter get pissed off.
Tony. That's not.
Yeah,
this is the problem. This is the problem that I. Well, Spencer and I can talk about 40 minutes. He and I have 40-minute conversations every single week. But if you're gonna treat Dennis Dodd like that, then it's not like a mutual. This is not going to be a respectful conversation because Dennis is a reputable reporter. And I just don't think, I just don't believe that's fair to do.
I would respectfully disagree that on this topic, I don't think he's been
something.
Yeah, we lost Tony.
I think we know
where he's
question
going.
Dennis's character, and very rightfully so, he's been cut off. So his reporting and whatnot. So I just can't get down with that. No, I think it's
well, I can neither vouch for Dennis Dodd nor criticize Dennis Dodd as the moderator of this. So I'm just going to let it stand that Tony's on one side of this in regards to Dennis Dodd's reporting just strictly on the landscape of college football with this issue. And then obviously Josh has stated where he stands on Dennis Dodd and his credibility. Shoelace Sooner here with the super chat. We appreciate you. I have no clue what is going to happen. I just know someone is going to have egg on their face getting the popcorn. Well, Shoelace Sooner, I'm going to be right because it's my channel. So that's the easy one right there. And
Mark is always right.
And of course, Shoelace Sooner, you're right because you're off to the SEC. So you're in good shape. So we appreciate you stopping by. And before we allow Tony to continue, LBC Trojan chiming in. We appreciate Rick. Thank you so much for being here. As always, by the way, Rick and I get together tomorrow night and we argue the greatest program in college football in the 60s and 70s and bring the metrics concerning that. That's Thursday at 6 Eastern. Rick says, why would Fox pay more money for lower tier Big 12 products? Pac-12 teams joining the Big 12 when they are invested in the Big 10 to compete with ESPN and SEC. Oversaturation and diminishing returns is bad business.
I mean, there's inherent value
I don't know that
in sports,
they would.
isn't there? I feel like in the age of streaming, the last thing we all watch live that has, the most, well, I guess I shouldn't say the most because I don't have all the numbers in front of me and whatnot, but the last thing that we all watch together live as a society is sports. And so if a move were to take place and you scooped up, lower tier Pac-12 brands as the Big 12, that could just be a long-term investment there. Like everyone, I think, always thinks short-term, like what do they bring right now? Are they good at this right now? Or, streaming is terrible right now. You got to be on linear and all that sort of stuff. And I, do agree that having a linear component is helpful at some level, but the investments from either a conference or a network may not only be thinking about this year and next year, but what does 5 years look like from now? Like, and it's really hard to know. And I'm sure there are people who think about this a heck of a lot more than I do. Like, what is a school's value now? What could it be in 5 years? What could it be in 8 years? Like I've looked at a lot of different expansion candidates for the Pac-12 now and in the future on my show, because I think if you look at programs and institutions as a whole now versus just, 5-6 years ago, no one ever mentioned the idea of adding Tulane to the Pac-12. No one would have ever thought of it as a semi-feasible idea. But here we are, one Cotton Bowl victory later, and it's like, oh, okay, that could actually be reasonable. And I'm just using that as an example to say, like, why, just to address this question directly, like, why would they go after this? Why would they, do this if it doesn't appear to have a lot of value? They might see long-term upside that we don't right now. And they probably have a better feel for the changing landscape in college football than us.
Absolutely. Sports fans are prisoners of the moment. And you guys have all wrestled with, I'm sure, comments made by viewers concerning, Stanford football. Stanford football is awful. Why would anyone want Stanford football? Well, it was a top 5 to 10 program just 10 years ago. And it's been proven throughout its history that when it's run correctly, that it can be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And you guys know, those of you guys who watch our Pac-12 show know, I mean, what Jed Fish is doing at Arizona is phenomenal. I mean, he has rebuilt them up from the ground up, and
they have a fascinating year ahead of them. They have a fascinating year ahead of them.
Year ahead of them.
They had so much momentum, And like so much momentum coming off of last year. It didn't pay off the way I thought it would in the recruiting trail after how their 2022 cycle went. But you've got Jaden Delora back. You've got Tetairoa McMillan. You've added some transfer pieces. You lost a couple as well. But like overall, if Arizona goes out and has a 7-8 win season, gosh, that would be an outstanding year. But the pack is
and Colorado. I mean, Colorado, I think, is going to have
really
a rough year, but Colorado's made the commitment as well. And so that's why when people talk about like Colorado and Arizona, you know, I mean, and we tease them, you know, we tease our friends from there. We have Colorado and Arizona people that help with our Pac-12 show. We love them. They are on the upward trajectory. And I think there's enormous value in the programs, enormous value in the school, enormous media value. They're, huge contributors. They've been important parts of the conference. I mean, Colorado actually helps. I think they still run the Pac ALC, which is part of the academic consortium. It's their website is hosted on their site. So there is there's so much upside in those schools. And personally, just personal thing. I hope that they can get them back on track, because football is better when we have the Desert Swarm, and it's better when Colorado's rocking. I mean, when Jeremy Bloom there's nothing better than when Jeremy Bloom is returning punts. And so we need to get Colorado back to there.
Spencer hit on what I think is another crux of this entire debate, and that's the current valuation of streaming versus linear and what the projection is, and more importantly, what those presidents believe that to be. That's going to be enormous.
And that's something that, again, remember with the Pac-12, the presidents run the show more so than any other conference.
You think even more so than the Big Ten, where they just kind of like armbarred Kevin Warren out the door?
What conference is there where the presidents don't report anything?
The Big Ten had their shift in 1990. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Don't the presidents kind of run the show in every conference? Like nothing. I mean, obviously Greg saying he kind of runs his own show, but every move they make is like a moneymaker. So there's really not a whole lot to.
So the SEC and the Big 12 delegate more sort of like power and authority to the conference. It's a cultural thing. The SEC and the Big 12 sort of used to delegate it to Texas. It was DeLost Dodds. Now the sort of the Big 12 has given it to the conference, and that's actually for a lot of conferences. That's a really good thing. But you have a couple of conferences that just culturally in their organization, because I worked with universities, have from all over the country and stuff, and so I can tell you there is cultural differences. USC is not going to let a conference person like sort of speak for them. They speak for themselves. Stanford speaks. It's just a little bit of a cultural difference that is fine, and it's a good thing. But it is a difference that you see a lot. The Ivy League is the worst of all. The Ivy League, you never see that. You never hear from the executive director. You hear from that they're the worst at it, because they are the most controlling of their schools. And remember that the Pac-12 was founded on being half model. When they founded it, they modeled half off the Big Ten and half off the Ivy League, and that was one of the pieces that they took, because they were so ferociously angry with what happened in the 1950s with the commissioner. But again, they didn't allow it to be called a commissioner. Remember, they didn't even allow the conference for the first decade to be called a conference. It was an association. So that there is very much that clinging to control that's always sort of historically been there. And it's sort of why they make decisions really slowly. And it's why if they decide that they want to take more time on their TV deal, then they do that. And the last thing in the world that they care about is what people on Twitter think. And that includes any of us. It's just culturally different.
But the problem is they're waiting so long now that other entities are starting to jump ahead of them. Like the NBA could get ahead of them. NASCAR.
Oh, 100%.
WWE.
But it is. You are right. But I'll tell you, one of the big faults is people that act like that's on the commissioner, because it's not on the commissioner. It's on the president.
I don't argue.
And
the
president's accountable.
I mean, I get that, but you can't deny that George Kliavkoff has stuck his foot in his mouth multiple times, which is probably why he doesn't talk anymore.
Well, he doesn't talk because his bosses are the ones making the decision. Again, it's a cultural thing. It's a different thing that has.
Well, he
to
hasn't
do with
decided
those
if he's going
presidents.
shopping yet in the Big 12, so he hasn't decided that. He hasn't decided that yet.
I'm still trying to find out. I joked with the Stanford tree that I thought he was the one that wrote that line. I'm trying to figure out which intern it was. But I mean, I don't know that they should have made the cheap shot line. I thought it was pretty funny. Really bothered Big 12 fans. I mean, the funny thing about it is, remember, this is the conference that less than a
treating a
year
conference
ago,
like it was a mall, treating a conference like it was a mall, and now not being able to have a television deal much past your deadline. You should get absolutely.
That's a little aggrieved and indignant when they are literally trying to take their members. They are literally trying to take Pac-12 members. 9 months that Pac-12 members have told them no.
What? Yeah, but why wouldn't they? Should
the Big 12 is trying to take Pac-12 members.
They haven't told them no.
Yeah.
Okay, so then don't get aggrieved if they're going to punch back.
No,
like they're allowed to. They're allowed to. It's like, oh my God, they're being mean to us.
Was first. The shopping line was poorly.
No, they were trying to take members before that. They started trying to take members on the afternoon of June 30th. The afternoon of June 30th, they started trying, and it was smart. They should.
Also, hold on. Can we get to the?
They should.
Original chart. The original chart where it said Big 12.
Yeah. Okay. So are we moving on to number 3?
Because, well, what about the? I want to see the original chart.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, let's get to that. So. Yeah, one of the things we actually didn't hit a piece. Let me flip back to that. So I'll tell you my thought on that, and that is there are a lot of I'm flipping on the wrong window. Sorry. There are a lot of reasons, particularly academically, which is why every member of the Big 12 has multiple times a member has applied to the Pac-12. But given that the Big 12 has its 99-year membership deal. That is 99-year membership, or I don't know if it's 97 now, whatever it's at. And it's going to be about $100 million buyout. I don't think it makes sense for anyone to leave the Big 12. And it's also a big reason that I don't think that anyone from the Pac-12 would willingly join. I don't know. Do you guys think that given at this point, I mean, do you think that there would be any reason for someone to leave? I don't think so anymore. I think that they are so locked in contractually.
I mean, Texas and Oklahoma did it.
I mean, every one of them has joined and every one of them has been rejected. I don't think that any more that they should. What do you think?
The idea that the Big 12, after securing the television contract, that, am I allowed to use Andrew Marchand's reporting from the New York Post and John Oran from the Sports Business Journal, or are we poo-pooing them too?
I don't know.
Josh,
I mean, they don't have any insight, but go ahead.
Okay. So, ESPN originally had there was a television deal, at least, similar to the one that the Big 12 had available to the Pac-12. That one has since been gone, according to Andrew Marchand and I think John Morand on their podcast, the first ones to say that. I don't understand why the Big 12 would leave, any Big 12 school would leave for that conference for the Pac-12 with their television deal and also with the current state of affairs, once again, refer to what San Diego State's AD said, where he goes, we're either going to the Big 12 or the Pac-12, which shows you there is some uncertainty in the path.
So Josh, I think right now it wouldn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense, but these media deals expire. The Big 12 expires in 2030, 31. Yeah. Ahead of that season or after that season or somewhere in that time.
2031 is when it expires. Yeah.
If the Pac-12 is able to get a deal that is tenable, not just to the Pac-12, but in the eyes of Big 12 presidents and ADs and whatnot, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
Okay, I would ask you, what reporting has indicated at all the Pac-12 is going to get a deal like that?
That they're going to get a tenable deal that the presidents are going.
Big 12
presidents will be happy with.
That looks good to me.
No. I'm saying
me the direction of reporting of that, I will give it credence. But
no. I'm saying, let's say the Pac-12 gets a deal.
I mean, we're not playing TV insider here because nobody here has any idea. Certainly, Andrew Marchand doesn't. He admits he doesn't have any inside sources on that negotiations. But as far as one of the big things, remember, guys, the Big 12 is not just the Pac-12 members are committed through the ends of their media deals. The Big 12 members are committed for 99 years. It's not to the end of the media deal. There's the grant of rights issue, which is that you've sold your grant of rights, and so you have to negotiate that back. There's also a 99-year deal they've put in a poison
you can
pill
get out of
that
that if Texas and
better than
Oklahoma
anything
just
people
bailed,
catch.
and Colorado's left, and Nebraska's left, and Missouri's left.
Yeah. Well, that's what Texas and Oklahoma had to negotiate their way out of, and they had the advantage of Fox and ESPN to help them. But Texas and Oklahoma put that in when everybody left because they didn't want other people to leave, and then it sort of came back to bite them on the butt. Which is
right, but you're mentioning
remember the Big 12 is a 99-year deal.
Right, but you're mentioning that as if it's impossible for schools to now leave the Big 12 now or in the future.
Well, they'd have to write a huge check or negotiate their way out of a huge check.
Right.
Why in the hell would a Big 12 school leave?
And I don't think anybody would do that.
No. So Josh, the question I want to ask you is, let's say the Pac-12 gets a deal.
Open about
Big 10. If Kansas wants to go to the Big 10.
Yeah, no. I
Kansas.
Can see that, but
if the Kansas Jayhawks went to the Pac-12,
let's just say the Pac-12 deal comes out in 2 weeks, and I can finally break something down. Just as hypothetical, and it's $28 million per school per year, and there's enough linear to keep everybody happy on the exposure front and whatnot. And that deal comes out, and then that deal, let's say my guess has always been 5 to 6 years, and there have been indications from presidents that that's kind of what they are shooting for, and I think that makes a lot of sense. At the end of that 5 to 6 year run, could you foresee a world in which the Pac-12 is in a stronger place football-wise than the Big 12, where some schools would be drawn over to the Pac-12, especially given a school like Kansas that at least has more of an academic inclination than other ones might see a benefit to going
it's less
over.
money. You said less, 28 million per school per year?
Yeah. I'm not saying they'd be a part of this deal. I'm saying when the deal that they're currently negotiating comes to an end.
Right. Why would they leave if it is not a deal that is expressly better money wise and also expressly better viewership wise?
If
no
they're
Big 12 school.
Well, our friend Eric has got the comment there. That's why. Like, if the money athletically is roughly the same, and you're a school that has any sort of academic inclination, there's no question it's better to be in the Pac-12 than the Big 12.
I would like Eric and others to show me any reporting that has indicated that Kansas is willing to leave the Big 12 to go to the Pac-12.
We're just talking about.
Yes, speculate, sure, but I'm just saying
they've applied.
I'm going to base
5 times in their history.
Look, if you can show me they've applied in the recent and any recent memory at all, the only rumors which were debunked were Kansas to the Big 10.
Yeah, they applied in 2021. That's pretty recent.
Okay,
but that was before USC and UCLA left, Tony. Things have changed, man.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's before USC and UCLA, that's a totally different league.
No, I know. I'm just he just asked me if they've applied any time recently.
Yes. Okay. Under the context of like everybody has got their, I guess, less full deck of cards.
Okay. If we're gonna you asked, I was answering.
Right.
I got something I want to add here. This kind of goes back to earlier. I know it's kind of off topic, but I wanted to get it out earlier, and I wasn't able to get a word in, so I'm going to say it now. When the Texas OU buyout came up, they gave $100 million to the Big 12 conference. $20 million of that went to Fox to make up for the lost games that they're losing with Texas and Oklahoma. There's $80 million sitting out there that the Big 12 has acknowledged they could use to help pay for a team to enter the conference. So for all the conversations about where would the money come from, part of it could come from that, if needed.
Isn't that
I
money
thought we
going
had an answer
to
on
the
that, Coos?
Coos, I could be wrong here, so I'm legitimately inquiring. I thought my understanding was that money is going directly to the holdover Big 12 schools for money they've lost from the value of Texas and Oklahoma leaving.
But you distribute that money like you would for a television contract. It's the same kind of concept.
But Mac Rose was on 365 one day, and they directly asked him that. And he said, yes, it could be used for that if they wanted.
Right. The schools would agree to say, all right, we just got this money. We could use this then to distribute that.
Okay. So the money is going to the schools, but then those university presidents could say, hey, we think it's an advantageous opportunity here to add X, Y, and Z. And
to use the extra money that we've gotten to then add
Okay. Got it.
Although remember that the original and they can totally do that. Would they have said that the original that money is going to, or the majority of that money, and I think it's like 60 some of the 80, I forget the exact amount, is
80,
going to pay for the but it's like 60 or whatever of the 80 is going to pay for the currently the remaining 8 for the next year have to subsidize out of their share of the conference deal the partial money that they're giving to the 4 new schools. And so supposedly the first sort of dip into that well is I don't know what it's like 60 or 65 million or something that is repaying the remaining 8 for the share that they essentially agreed to front for the new schools.
Well, they're not fronting it because they're
again,
taking
they
less
could
money.
choose not to take that. What?
They're taking less money to be
Which, I'm sorry?
league, you know. They are gradually working their way up.
The remaining 8 also agreed to give up.
Yes,
whatever the
very small portion.
75, 60, 70 million, whatever the number was. So it's great because it reimburses them for that, but there's not a lot left over after that, is my understanding from 365.
Right. Yeah, you have to convince other schools to give up a certain amount of money to anybody else. That is 100% true. I think we'd all agree on that.
All right. Well, should we get to our here?
Absolutely.
Option 3, which would be
Tony, let's
the
hit
nuclear
the super chat here real quick
scenario.
before you get to that. Opie, it seems strange to me that the Pac-12 has not complained about the Big Ten, but only mentions the Big 12. That's kind of shallow, isn't it? They know that Oregon and Washington have put it in to go to the Big Ten, their application. Yes.
And not going to the Big Ten. I mean, like you can
I
your application
feel like
to Mary Taylor Swift too. But
yeah, I think the Big Ten has made it pretty clear at this point in time, and my understanding with their new commissioner Tony Petitti is that he's not going to come in and try and ruffle the feathers. And as we've talked about, the presidents collectively have more power than the individual commissioner. So if the Big Ten were willing to, I mean, Oregon and Washington, Washington, I think, has more of an academic desire, but certainly has an athletic desire to be in the Big Ten for football. And I think for Oregon, it's almost entirely a football reason as to why they would want to join the Big Ten, but they want to go. I think they would be smart in one way, but not in others, to want to go there. But I think the Big Ten is pretty repeatedly at this point made it clear that they don't have a desire at this point in time to go further west with more Pac-12 schools. And I think part of the reason they're in that mindset, which makes sense to me, is that, and I think there was a Big Ten president who talked about this not long ago, like there are logistical challenges, whether it's scheduling, travel, matchups, whatever, to having USC and UCLA. Like it is a very, very new thing for them to have Maryland and Rutgers over here, USC and UCLA over there. I'm reversing the camera, so I put that on the wrong side. But you get the point that I'm making. Like it is a different element for them to try and deal with. And I think they're going to go at it at least for a few years, or at least a couple years, and try to figure out how can we make this work smoothly? What does it feel like? What do we like? What do we don't like? What do we need to tweak? What do we need to adjust? And then maybe they could decide, okay, now that we've kind of got our footing on this sort of stuff, because there are so many logistics involved with running a conference from an athletic standpoint. Once we've kind of got our footing and it's, very normal and it's into our routine, then we could look at going west again. But I just think right now that's a pretty significant undertaking. And I'm curious what you guys think, that if they were really wanting to go further west, I think they would have already done it. But I think they're in the mindset of, we got the big TV draws that we were looking for. We got the Los Angeles market. We got these great academic schools. Like we're good for now. And the Big Ten is good for now. They've got 16 schools, and they've got the biggest TV contract in the country.
What about the report the other day, though, that Jim Williams tweeted out? And Jim Williams, Emmy-winning producer, okay, has no dog in this fight. That's one of his sources told him that they were not taking Oregon and Washington for now, but we're waiting to see if any of the corner schools left first. Then they might look at it differently.
Right, because if those schools were to leave, you'd end up getting Oregon and Washington probably at a much more significant discount.
That was my thought as well.
And you wouldn't get sued for collusion or whatever.
Which once again brings us thing all the way
Well,
back
and
to like
actually,
it just matters what the Pac-12 numbers are going to be. Which, like, in the end,
Yeah.
like I know none of us know for sure. There's
Right.
concerns about them, but it's going to come down whether it's San Diego State or it's Oregon or it's Arizona, and they all might be headed different places. It's all coming down to those numbers, and we actually don't know what they actually going to be, and we're not even sure who they're going to be from.
and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, again, based on we're not getting into predictions, but shall we go on to our number 3, which I think is where we will get even more interesting debate, which
Yeah, I'm here for it.
is hold on. Mark, it's not letting me send the screen up. But our part 3 is sort of a nuclear scenario. So if there's like a massive catastrophic shift, I don't know, Stanford and Cal decide to join the Ivy League, which Stanford and Cal applied to the Ivy League in 1956 and were turned down, funny enough. They've been turned down by the Ivy League and the Big Ten. So, if there is some kind of a nuclear scenario, what do you guys think? I mean, so you guys know, I'll just quick tell you, I've said since last July, if there is a nuclear scenario, the Big 12 is a wonderful home for any of these schools. I don't know. Do you guys think is there a circumstance?
Well,
where
I think the nuclear
join?
scenario is the Big Ten changes the mindset that I was just talking about that they appear to have at this point in time. Because if they go to Oregon, Washington, I think Stanford and Cal would go because of the academic upside that the Big Ten presents in athletics. They're, Josh and I have talked about this many times. They're like, okay. Like it's as long as we can play, we just want to go out there and compete and have fun and, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so I think those schools would go, and then Oregon and Washington would probably also go as well. But I think the Big Ten could go to any of those schools or all 4 of them if they wanted to build like a really national conference and a big time West Coast pod. And they could say, we will bring you in at a 50% price for 5 years or whatever, 50% of, what we're paying these other schools. And that is still probably going to be $1, because just for media rights, the Big Ten is 75. Yeah. 75 million per school.
Let's just say I like to use 70 as like the base number. But
yeah. Okay. 70. If they offered them 50 or 60%, that is likely, based on what we know to this point, and we won't know for sure until we see the deal, of course, but that is likely, certainly if you got into the $40 million range, above what you'd make in the previous conference. So then, those schools would have to ask themselves, is that worth making the jump for that amount of money and going into that conference, but having the stability, but being in a tougher conference, athletically and whatnot, certainly from a football standpoint. But I think that's what the nuclear option would look like. And then I think the Utah, Colorado, and the Arizona schools would then probably be left to the Big 12, who we all agree, I think, would welcome them with open arms. I don't know if they'd go for Oregon State and Washington State. I'd encourage them to in that scenario, because I would hate to see those programs that have worked so hard to build themselves up from a football standpoint to where they are now over the last decade and change. Oregon State's has been a little bit more recent, but like Washington State used to be, a bottom dweller in the conference, and now they're capable of making a bowl game year in and year out. And they're talking about, hey, can we win 9-10 games in a season? And Mike Leach showed that if everything goes the right way, you can win 11 games there. RIP Mike Leach, of course, Pirate forever.
As he does, man. What a king.
I know. But anyway, so I would think, and I'm curious what you think, Josh, like, would they take all of them and make a super conference, like of the 10 remainders? Like if the Big Ten wakes up tomorrow and decides, yeah, all right, we'll take those 4, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal, and then there are 6 schools just sitting there, and the 4 have reportedly received real interest from Brett Yormark in the Big 12, and they would like to have them there, would they go up and grab the other 2, or would they be left to their own devices to be independents or in the Mountain West?
The zombie Pac-12 thing. Look, it is the Big Ten. Obviously, is the one that can. It's much like any of those 2 conferences. If they came calling for anybody, those conferences, those schools, their leadership, it would be malpractice not to say yes. Right? It'd be wrong for them not to say yes. The amount of money. The Big Ten thing is, I think they're kind of on delay, right? I think they want to see, like everybody else does, what the numbers are going to be. But if Oregon and Washington were to go, I mean, I think you'd end up seeing the Big 12 take 2 to 4, and then Pac West Mountain. I don't know what you call it at that point. It'd be kind of zombie, whatever it is. But this is like the one sad part about this.
Pac West. That's what
right.
it would be.
I remind the folks
Pac
about this
West,
also.
baby.
I remind Big 12 folks about this every single day. I always say the anxiety and the fear of not being conference anymore. That was us recently. And Iowa State fans and West Virginia fans, who's can attest to this, are just like Wazoo fans and Oregon State fans. They just want to see their teams compete at the highest possible level because they deserve that. And look, sometimes you might get thumped. Sometimes you might get thumped like K-State was against Alabama. The rubber does meet the road at some point in time, but you know what? That's what we all want to see. So like,
hey, USC fans can tell you that to a lot of people against Alabama.
right. So like, I think that's one problem I always have when I see people being like, down the Pac-12. It's like, guys, you might be a K-State fan. There are Wazoo fans out there just like you. It's like, don't be like that. But yeah, I think everything is contingent on like the next round of offers, and I think time is getting short.
And I'll tell you, one of the other things so we talk about this on some of Mark's other channels is that when we talk about like the advantages of the Pac-12 or the Big 12, what we have to remember too is all of the Power 5 conferences are in rarefied air. They are 70. There's 70 schools between the 5 that are literally like most of the 70 of the best schools in the country. And when we talk about, yes, Stanford is in its own little world, but every single one of those 70 schools is a world-class institution, and every single one of those 5 conferences is a great conference that would be a great home for anybody. So I want to make sure that we reiterate that when we talk about realignment stuff, we try to talk about best fits and all that we don't lose sight of the fact that these are all great organizations full of great institutions. I think we forget that sometimes.
It's also, it's about the schools. Like the conferences, in the end of the day, they've got the history behind them.
Except Oregon. No, I'm just kidding.
But like you want, like the school's survival is what is important, right? Because the schools have the alumni and the fans, the people who care a lot. So like at the end of the day, I hope that every school has the ability to compete at the same level. I went to Missouri. They're very lucky that they're in the SEC, right? Like at the end of the day, all I would want is Missouri just to have a chance to compete at the same level as everybody else does. I think we could all say that for every school that we know that we support and care about. So that's kind of like the entire point of it. Sucks that it's not the way the sport's treated anymore. It's not how it's going. But like, just remember that, everybody, in this entire conversation about
You're a Missouri guy?
I am. MIZ. Always.
You're the reason we're not the
That's
SEC.
A great camp.
I wish you'd never told me that.
Oh,
Josh,
no.
you know my first impression, not even kidding, or first like flashback memory of Missouri is my brother picked them when they were a 2 seed with the Presley twins. What was that, like 2013?
Yeah, Phil and Sam Pressey.
Phil. The Pressey twins. He picked them all the way to the Final Four, and they got upset as a 2 seed, I believe it was, in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That and NFL legendary backup quarterback Chase Daniel, who is still making money on roster.
Making that cash.
That guy has had the greatest backup quarterback career. Has he ever had to play in like a highly stressful situation where he's gonna get ripped when he walks down the street or goes into the grocery store and someone's
at
like,
some point, I'm sure he has.
Why'd you throw that interception or whatnot? Like, I don't know that.
Hey, Drew Lock's the next one, right? The next great Missouri, backup.
I think we've got different demeanors there.
Can we just have a moment to appreciate the U.S. Open intern that went after Drew Lock on Twitter last year was like the funniest thing I've ever seen. I don't know if you guys saw that whole mess.
Yes, I did see this.
Wait.
That was the funniest ever riot.
I'm out of the loop.
I'll tell you later. Google Drew Lock U.S. Open. It's amazing.
Okay, that sounds good.
Great conversation, folks. Appreciate you all being here. Appreciate these guys because they've made for a lively debate. And I'm here every day talking college football, so you hear from me all the time. So we wanted some brains on here. So we went for Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks, Locked On Pac-12. Spencer, we'll start with you in regards to what you got going on there.
Yeah, Locked On Pac-12 and Locked On Ducks are Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I am on Twitter at Smalls_55. My DMs and mentions are wide open. Hit me up anytime. Appreciate all of you who have been tuned in, keeping the comments rolling along. And Mark, thanks for the invite. It was a very, very enjoyable way to spend some time.
Yeah, I know to hit you up anytime. So
yeah, I'm always just sitting around. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a life, man. I work and I golf. That's all I do. I talk about sports and golf. Those are the only two things I do all the time.
Terrible life, man. Terrible life.
That's a good thing.
It's not bad. I played 18 holes this morning. It was great.
Chad, you need to know that May is great debate month here at the Voice of College Football. So this is kickoff. And then on Thursday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time, we are debating the top programs of the 60s and 70s in college football. And for my panel here and everybody in the chat, if you've got a debate that you want to wage, bring it. Let me know, and we will do it. I've got a long list of debates that we want to line up similar to this one. So, Josh, you're up next. Appreciate your time here, Josh, and thanks for showing up tonight. Your debut here.
What we can say, my time, something else. I do have a girlfriend. She's upset that I took too long doing this. I'm supposed to call her.
I don't have.
You guys can find me on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at Josh.
Hello, we're sorry.
You can find Locked On Big 12 wherever you guys get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well. You can see Spencer and I talk about a whole bunch of, the last hour and a half of our podcast is us just going back and forth about a variety of things, which is always a lot of fun. So, Mark, I appreciate it. Tony, I appreciate it. Kuz, as always, nice talking to you. And Spencer, it's always great. I've sent you way too much in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, I know. We've done 2 straight podcasts together, and now we've done this. So
we're basically at about 3 hours of taped content together in the last 48 hours.
Yes,
so we're ready to get off.
Hours, and they spent the last one talking
about. You guys are great together, though. You guys are like the perfect odd couple.
I'm flying to the Pacific Northwest for a couple weeks.
We are the
tomorrow,
odd couple.
And I don't think I'm going to talk to Josh. I'm not going to send him a message. Nothing. No. I'm going to circle back with him late next week.
Yeah.
Monday. I don't think you can hold out that long, Spencer. We're going to have to put some money on that. Everybody put in. Yeah.
Also, Kuz, I hadn't met you before. It's nice to meet you, man. Love chatting with you, man.
Yes, sir.
Kuz's Corner, a great place to be here on YouTube. So get on over there as well. Justin, what do you have working these days?
Always covering some conference realignment news or reports, sometimes rumors that are out there. Obviously, I cover a lot of West Virginia. As you can tell, I hate my team based on my background here, and I'm not shy. But so I cover them. Any recruiting updates, things like that. We've got a couple guys that we might land in the portal here that are pretty big gets. We're hoping in the next couple of days. So we're keeping an eye on that. And also, I cover anything Big 12 related. Trying to do a little bit more of that too, instead of being so boxed in on just West Virginia. But come over and check me out. You can follow me on Twitter at Kuz206, Kuz's Corner on YouTube, Kuz's Corner 206 on Instagram. And I have a website now too, by the way, called Kuz'sCorner.com.
Nice. Folks, if you're not aware, we've got team channels all over the place, and we're going to be putting Tony through the car wash with his presentation abilities and graphics to kind of outline each school that we cover here at the Voice of College Football and what they bring to the table in regards to history, academics, brand, culture, the whole deal, football, of course. And so, Tony, where can we find you? I know that this is not typically difficult for a lot of people to find you, but just in case.
Yeah, so you guys can always DM me on Twitter if you have any questions. Always glad to chat with folks. We have our USD post games here on the Voice of College Football channel and our Pac-12 chat shows. Our next chat show that's coming up, although the tree was in the Galapagos Islands, is we're going to have a Tree and Oski versus the Pac-12 little showdown debate. It'll be really fun. The actual former Tree and the actual former Oski are going to come on and duke it out and dish out some reality to the other 10 schools. That'll be a good time. And then we're going to talk a lot about some really interesting new data that we've pulled on every school that we cover here on the Voice of College Football channel. So we got some really cool stuff, and we've pulled it all the way from those schools down through, everything from D1 to D2 to D3, and some really, really neat new stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And I'm not going to list all those schools because we would be here for another 12 minutes. So just basically anyone playing top 25 football, we probably got you covered, and West Virginia included. So we tack them on. No. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here. And again, lock in on Spencer's work. Lock in on Josh. They do a phenomenal job, as well as Coos and Tony as well. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. We'll catch everybody tomorrow night at 6 Eastern.
Thanks, everybody.